The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
This is not America. Sha-la-la-la-la. Little piece of you.
And welcome to Talking Truth and Power. While we negotiate some headphones in here, we're going to get to a lot in here. But today, the main issue, the main story right now is that the Fed has just hiked by 50 basis points. And that's a huge development in the financial world. We have our engineer, Shanimal, trying to sort things out here. Someone came in and stole all the headsets.
They are missing.
You got it?
Yeah. All right. Can you hear me?
I think he'll get your volume up here in a second once he gets into the booth. Live radio.
All right.
Yep.
All right, we're on. This is your.
Might have to move over just a hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is your host, Brendan Trainor.
All right.
My co-host is Leland Faegre, and the engineer that just set us up and working the boards is Shanimal Lawson.
Morning.
Good morning. This is live community radio.
Yes. Anything goes.
Yeah. And we're Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio.
Yes, we are.
And well, I think the besides the interest rate hike, the biggest thing in the news is the Supreme Court leak on the abortion issue.
Yeah. But before we get to that, and that's
Yes.
a huge story,
Yes.
this interest rate hike this morning is the biggest in 40 years.
It is. Yeah, I didn't realize
it's
that.
a huge story. It's a big hike.
Yeah.
It's a big story.
50 basis points.
Because we're already halfway to an official recession by
Yes.
definition, because we just had a decline in the GDP last week since
1.5% or something.
1.4,
Yeah.
which happened after our last show, so we weren't able to talk about it. But it's an enormous development in the scheme of things for those
Right.
who enjoy and are following this.
So it'll make it harder to borrow money, and
Everything will be more expensive.
right. And
And-
but it's designed to wring the inflation out of the system.
Well, that's what it's designed to do. It's going to bring out the enterprise of the system. Is what it's going to do.
But all that money in lower than natural interest rates, according to Austrian economics, is the cause of the inflation and also any recessions, the business cycle. So sooner or later, there has to be a correction. But then the central bank, being a central authority, is rarely going to get it right. I mean, they don't have the input that millions of people have in a free market. So that's the problem with central planning, and the problem with progressive institutions like the Federal Reserve.
And the only power they have is the ability to raise short-term rates,
Right.
which is what they've done this morning. Now, the markets, the equity markets, have rallied on the news. The Dow is up 200 points. But, I mean, I think this is the end of our discussion about whether we're headed to a recession.
Yes.
It's already
Yeah.
here.
All the malinvestments that
Yeah.
occurred during the boom are going to wring themselves out.
And Biden's budget takes us to a $45 trillion debt, if that were to become law.
Yes. And
It's already
What am I
30
doing
trillion.
here?
Yeah, we were wondering that ourselves.
yeah, and 33 billion for the Ukraine.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, we're in it to win it.
Well, that's a down payment on the Third World War, is what it is.
Exactly.
Because that's exactly what they would need to kind of jumpstart.
Well, George W. Bush said war is good for the economy.
Yeah, well, it does tend to benefit certain sectors of the economy. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Not the ones perhaps that you and I would prefer.
Prefer, yeah, right, exactly.
Raytheon Missile Works?
Yeah,
Yes,
that would
exactly.
be one. The industrial military complex.
I don't know if it's true, but people on the left are saying 20 billion would end homelessness in America.
No, I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't figure out what government spending will do because it usually does more harm than good.
Yeah, they don't know how to spend money. They've
So,
been proving it for a long, long time.
but at least it's a little bit of a metric to say, why are we sending all this billions of dollars that we don't have? We're going to borrow it from China first?
And Musk was asked that very question by a so-called reporter the other day.
Oh,
Yeah.
and what did
Why
he
do you want to buy Twitter when you could have spent your money
Oh, Elon Musk, yeah,
more
yes.
charitably?
Yeah, so sure. You could make everybody a millionaire, Elon.
Yeah, because he's so smart.
Yeah, so that's the state of the economy right now, and if you don't have at least 10% of your assets in gold and silver, you might want to consider doing it.
And energy.
And energy, yeah, oil and gas futures are outperforming everything, even crypto.
Because the like of precious metals are not necessarily going to rally if we go into recession,
Mm-hmm.
because that would mean stagflation by definition,
Yes.
and inflation that's sort of held back by a recession
Mm-hmm.
would not tend to promote precious metals.
Yep. Hey, Jimmy Carter's 70s is calling.
Yeah, it looks like that all over again.
Yeah. So it's will there be a Ronald Reagan and Paul Volcker to emerge and put an end to it?
I think they're all basically Reagans and Volckers, aren't they? They're all the same.
Yeah. Well, we're just going to have to we're just pawns in the game of life.
The framers
you know?
didn't give us a central bank, but in 1913, miraculously,
Uh-huh.
I use the term loosely, we have one now. And unless we can get rid of it, they'll inflate their way out of everything. Or
Everything,
try to.
right. And they'll do so in unison with the other central banks.
Oh, it's
around
all
the
in
globe.
coordination.
Yep.
Yep.
It's a globalist scheme.
And eventually, the United Nations will have a central bank.
You predicted it here.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
And welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. I'm your host, Brennan Trainor, and my co-host is Leland Faegre. And we were talking about the Fed, and then we also mentioned the leak of the abortion draft of a possible decision,
And
because
the
we
leak-
don't know exactly what's going
Yeah,
on.
and the leak that you describe is in quotes because it was clearly deliberate.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
It was an orchestrated attempt to control the narrative
Mhm.
literally on the day that sets up the next 6 months
Mm-hmm.
and the election itself, the general election.
Okay.
So it was designed as pretty much a dog whistle.
Oh, yeah? Who let the dogs out?
That's what it was. It was a dog. It was a whistle to the left. And we've already got riots,
Yes, we have.
and they're going to be wholesale going forward.
Mhm.
We're in the next phase of the new American Civil War. That's what this signaled,
Yeah.
because they have nothing else. And this is what desperation looks like.
Yes. You're absolutely right. The Democrats have literally nothing else to run on, certainly not their record, and not amid all the scandals that are plaguing the president's family. And I mean, they got nothing. But will the Republicans be able to take advantage of it and actually steer the country in a different direction? The regular news reported that J.D. Vance won the Ohio primary and that every single candidate Trump endorsed in Ohio and Illinois won.
30 and Texas.
And
He's got
Texas.
33 now endorsed candidates that have won.
Okay.
Isn't that something?
It's something.
It's especially since endorsements oftentimes don't mean anything.
Yes.
You know, you might get some earned media out of it, something like that you didn't have to pay for, but it generally doesn't mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But if that endorsement is Donald J. Trump,
then it looks like it means something.
you've hit mother lode, yeah.
So we...
And it wasn't just J.D. Vance, who incidentally was about 40 points, that was what I saw, 40% down 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
But then he came out anti-war right after Trump came out anti-war.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who endorsed Donald J. Trump? Noam Chomsky.
I saw that, yeah. Right.
He's taking a lot of flack from the left, but it's true.
He doesn't care.
Yeah, Trump is the only statesman, like he said, who is urging a peaceful settlement in Ukraine.
Chomsky, I had a conversation with, an online conversation with him several years ago, and he disavowed the significance of the Council on Foreign Relations in our conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that was because he didn't really care to go down that road.
Right.
It wasn't because he didn't understand the significance of the CFR. But
Well, I wonder, because the thing is, he paints himself as such a radical, but every election it's vote blue no matter who, and he said, if you vote for Trump, we'll all be underwater soon, and all this. I mean, he just, and he got a lot of flack for that from people on the real left, but I wonder what he thinks about that now. Does he have voters' remorse? Who knows? Well,
let's get him on the show.
Yeah, let's call up Noam. The only thing is, he's just so
Noam.
slow to speak. And we only have an hour show.
Right. And we should have a couple hours today because there's so much going on.
Right. I mean, my notes are like 10 pages. It's 20 pages.
I
really,
pulled a
double-sided.
muscle in my bicep muscle, just lifted him.
So the best way to get something done,
Uh-huh.
if you hold near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
He said yesterday that we had to get the Javelin missiles to Russia.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we all know what he meant.
But what they don't know is that they don't really work, and they're probably never going to reach the battlefield, and and they're not going to be well trained on them.
If it's coming in on a train, it's not going to get there.
No.
We have to take care of the cure. That will make the problem worse no matter what.
And he says this morning, did you hear him this morning? He said this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
Oh, my goodness.
They just don't know how to get out of their own way, do they?
No.
This is desperation as we've never seen it before.
I mean, there have been plenty of others. Sacco and Vanzetti just come to mind, and the Puerto Rican nationalists, their assassinations in the 50s.
Sure.
There have been plenty of extreme organizations.
These law-abiding white supremacists that go to church every Sunday.
You know the thing.
And, they come out and say that when a black nationalist shoots up the subway system in New York City.
And another frustration that the Democrats are experiencing is they would love to kill that filibuster
Oh, yeah.
that Harry Reid
Right.
brought about.
Right now, the cause célèbre is codifying Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. So, but Manchin and Sinema will not cower to that kind of a threat.
Well, there are some pro-life Democrats, just like there are some pro-choice Republicans.
Sure.
Yeah.
Even if they don't want to admit it.
Yeah. So, they don't want to take down the filibuster, and they probably shouldn't, because if they did, then we would have their democracy instead of our
Well, that was
republic.
exactly what I was going to say. And their definition of the word democracy.
Yes.
Simple majority.
Right. Majority rule for everything,
Encroachment.
which is really oligarchic rule, because the majority won't have that much say either. So, all right. So we have about 5 minutes in the segment. The demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, 70 days. Russia's still not out of gas or missiles. Now they're claiming they're going to run out of missiles. But Ukraine is losing hundreds of soldiers, killed, wounded, or missing every single day. They are running out of gas, ammunition, weaponry. They've been observed driving mostly civilian vehicles because their armored vehicles are being destroyed. They're being ordered to attack the Russians without proper equipment and to fight to the death in hopeless situations.
Well, they're certainly doing that.
Yes.
You got to hand it to them.
Yeah. They are showing bravery, but they are surrendering too. And they captured Ukrainian soldiers, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, I have no way of confirming, show more older men, suggesting more reservists being called up. So, and just keep in mind, though, when liberals cheer on dead Russians, they're thinking of you and me. They have been indoctrinated with linking Trump, the right, Republicans, and libertarians as Russians.
It's like a Hallmark card.
They fantasize that they're the Ukrainian resistance fighters fighting those horrible, savage, brutal, rapist Russians.
Now, does Putin have cancer? As it's
There are rumors about his health. There were rumors about Defense Minister Shoigu's health too.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't have anything new for you on that, and we'll circle back with you directly. I can circle back. I'll circle back with you.
Well, the New York Post is claiming that he does, in fact, have cancer. I don't know how they would know that necessarily.
Right. I don't know either.
You're only as good as your sources in that business. So,
well, I did want to mention that this last May 2nd, 2 days ago, was the anniversary of the bloody massacre of Federalist peaceful protesters by a mob of neo-Nazi hooligans in May of 2014. That was just a couple of months after the bloody protest in the Maidan and the coup against the elected president of Ukraine.
that was when they had lit up a building with
Right.
a bunch of
The protesters, the Federalists, if you want to call them that, the Federalists, because they wanted autonomy for, Russian speakers. The Federalists were driven into a trade union building by the protesters, who descended on them with bats and other weapons. And the hooligans then started throwing Molotov cocktails into the building. And the police did nothing. And there's even video of some policemen firing into the building at the protesters. So at least 40 were burned to death. I don't know if we have a complete accounting, because no complete investigation ever happened. And the leader of the neo-Nazi gang later served in the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada. But what's significant is this event became the trigger for the uprising in the Donbass. 8 days after the Odessa massacre, coup resistors in the far eastern provinces of Donetsk and Lugansk, bordering on Russia, voted in a referendum to become independent from Ukraine. So
Yeah.
it
was a significant event.
Yes, it was.
Sort of a false flag moment.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it was a real flag. I mean, it
Yeah.
really showed the hatred that some people
But it
had
serves
for Russians.
it serves as an incentive to do
Right.
something.
Right, exactly. So then the Ukrainian parliament responded by outlawing the speaking of the Russian language, and in the schools, and Russian culture. And so that's why I have publicly said that I think that what happened over the last 8 years in eastern Ukraine was a genocide, a cultural and physical genocide. And that's why I think Russia was basically right to intervene. They didn't start the war. They're trying to stop it.
They were actually patient, weren't they?
8 years.
Yeah.
They
Could have acted much sooner.
They got the Minsk Accords signed, and everybody's talking. Well, we'll be back after the break.
Everybody's talking.
Everybody's talking about it.
Join the conversation. Call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now, back to the show.
Hello, welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. I'm your host, Brendan Trainor, and my co-host is Leland Faegre.
Is someone trying to get you on your phone?
No. I was just double checking.
Don't they know you're doing a show, for crying out loud?
All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Russian outlook because, nobody else is going to.
No.
I mean, Don Bongino even is not going to. Certainly, Hannity is never going to do it, so we might as well step in. But anyway. So we're going to talk about the Slavocost. Now, the Slavocost culminated in World War II, but it was actually far worse than the Holocaust of the Jews. And the Slavocost was perpetrated by both the Aryans and the Semites, only in different ways. Semites...
Those damn Semites.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
The Semites, a.k.a., in Europe, the Jews, were viciously demeaned and persecuted by the Aryans. So how did the Semites murder the Slavs? Well, they murdered the Slavs through Bolshevism. That's how they did it.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah. They did it through Bolshevism. Bolshevism was the political military arm of Marxism-Leninism. Marxism is basically a Jewish messianic utopian philosophy which calls for perpetual revolution against the Christian capitalist world. Now, Marx was careful to include a central bank in his Communist Manifesto so the Jewish capitalist world would be untouched.
From
But
each
that's
according to
another
his
story.
abilities to each according to his needs. Yeah.
But it's well recognized that Bolshevism and Stalinist communism were anti-Christian. Tens of thousands of Orthodox churches were destroyed and Orthodox priests killed or sent to Siberia. At the same time, anti-Semitism was outlawed in Russia. As the great author Solzhenitsyn wrote, you have to understand the communist revolution was run by foreigners who hated Russia. Foremost among the foreigners were the Ashkenazi Jews, followed by Georgians, Finns, and Germans, all who hated Russia, and despised or looked down on the Slavic people and the Orthodox Christian religion. Now, the Aryans, of course, were the Germans, and they despised the Slavs as much or more as they despised the Jews. The German elites believed Russians were a dumb, barbaric race who were occupying large amounts of rich, fertile farmland better suited for superior Aryan German farmers. So, in other words, the Untermensch were preventing the Lebensraum.
I'm sorry?
The Untermensch, the subhumans, were preventing the Lebensraum.
I'm going to have to bounce that off the Ministry for Truth.
The Lebensraum, of course, was the German phrase for elbow room. They needed elbow room, so they had to invade other countries.
Hell, I need elbow room.
I do too, but I don't have the means to invade a whole nation. So the Germans invaded Russia to essentially steal the land and replace the populations. But the dumb Russians overwhelmed the Germans with bitter winters and impressive industrial and military output. But keep in mind, the Nazi plan was extermination and helotry for the Slavs under Aryan rule. Now, this hatred of Russians we see today with years and years of Russia, a collective punishment, seizure of property, imposition of loyalty oaths on Russian artists and athletes, threats and violent acts against Russian restaurants. Many of them are actually owned by Ukrainians. That is shocking to anyone who believes in the rule of law. We have seen German elites publicly looking down their noses at Slavic Russians with phrases like, they may look European, but they're not European, or they don't respect human life as much as we do. And so this is being presented openly in the same European media that punishes Holocaust denial with fines and imprisonment. So Russia, since the time of Peter the Great, has been trying to be more and more European. Peter made all the Russian noblemen shave their Asiatic beards and wear Western clothes at court. And the Romanov czars who followed Peter had a penchant for marrying German noblewomen and speaking French at court. Catherine the Great, probably one of the greatest of czars, was a German princess who came to Russia to be the bride of Peter the Great's grandson, the deeply neurotic Peter II. But Catherine dedicated herself to becoming completely Russian while still embracing Enlightenment ideas. She fought battles with the Ottoman Empire for control of the Black Sea, and then she purchased Crimea and southern Ukraine from the Crimean Khanate. Alexander I defeated Napoleon and kept France from dominating Europe and enforcing the French Revolution by bayonet.
Those mean old French.
Yeah. Under Tsar Nicholas I, Russia fought another war with the Turks, aligned with the British over Crimea and over Russia's claim to be the guardian of Christians in Islamic lands. Through Western history, the Slavs have been almost Christ-like in sacrificing themselves against barbaric hordes. They absorbed most of the Mongol invasion and finally, after 400 years, drove them back to China. What would Europe have been like if the Mongols had broken through? The Russians, along with the Baltic nations, kept the Ottoman Empire at bay.
That was going to be my next question.
Right.
Yeah.
Russia intervened in Syria and now in Ukraine in her historical role as protector of the Slavs and of Christians, and particularly Orthodox Christians. But European elites consider Russian barbaric because it did not convert to Christianity until 1000 AD, and because then it would not submit to the papacy.
Yeah, then it was an orthodoxy.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. The Protestants are offshoots of Catholicism, and they have doctrinal and ritual differences with the Orthodox as well, so they don't really get along with them. The collective West looks down on Russia because it did not participate in the Renaissance, which was basically a celebration of Western culture. They accuse Russia of cultural appropriation because they borrowed Enlightenment ideas from Western Europe. And now,
And didn't give them credit for it?
No, they gave them plenty of credit for it, yeah. And now, because Russia refuses to go woke and preside over the very destruction of Western civilization they are themselves promoting, they hate Russia even more.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Boy, you jumped forward 1,000 years there.
Yeah,
just
I
like
did.
that.
I covered 1,000 years in
In a couple
in
of
11
sentences.
minutes. But I think it's important if you want to understand the Russian psyche. And like I said, you have to have empathy. And Russia is technically not our enemy, even though Nancy Pelosi and a whole bunch of Congress people seem to think it is.
When I run into Russians here, I get
Right.
along great with them.
Yeah.
I have never had any trouble with them at all.
Yes.
But I think that's true of any
Russians interfered with the election.
with any government. You know,
Yeah.
governments are the problem, not the people themselves. So.
Exactly. But if you can paint the Russian government in this, called Putin, who's, he may have done some things, but so have our presidents. And a lot of the accusations against Putin have never been proven, and against Russia have never been proven. And the thing is that it's a country. It's a good country and a bad country, just like any other country. But it sees Ukraine as an existential threat, and that's why it's involved in the Ukraine. Ukraine is not an existential threat to America. Most Americans still can't find it on a map if you asked them to.
Right.
So why are we sending $33 billion over there?
Because they said so.
Because we're fighting.
Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russia.
That sounded like Keith Olbermann.
Yes, that was Keith Olbermann. I wonder if he's going to reply to Tulsi Gabbard's letter saying that he has to. And the Germans are now, a German politician said that they'll just have to ventilate their clothes instead of washing them as frequently.
Wow.
Maybe a European woman could start carrying baskets of clothes on their heads down to the river. That would really put it to Putin, boy.
That would show him.
Yes.
Tulsi had something to say about the Supreme Court leak, too, didn't she?
Yeah, yes, she came out. Yeah, of
She
course.
called it.
Yeah, she called it.
She called it.
She calls most things.
Yeah. I want her to come out.
And say she's Republican or something else.
Yeah.
I mean, how long is she going to stay?
'Cause we've got a big tent.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And she's well received on Fox. I think she would be well received in the party if she ever did decide to run.
Plenty of room for her.
The thing is,
not so much for Romney.
No. the thing is, Hawaii is such a blue state that
Yeah.
she might have a problem there trying to get elected.
But does she still reside there?
As far as I know, yeah. She's surfing away when she's not, doing her duty as a reservist.
Mm.
Yeah, I would love to see her switch, but at least we can hear her voice. So maybe her voice is still being heard. Maybe she can do something outside of electoral politics. We'll have to see.
One thing for sure, she doesn't seek to dominate the narrative, but when she comes out, she's got something to say.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So keep it up, Tulsi.
Yep. And take on Hannity again. I enjoyed that show.
Yeah. We enjoy when you come out with something to say. Because it affirms what we say here, basically.
Exactly. Well, we have a new ministry of disinformation.
I heard about that.
Yeah. And, by some coincidence, it all seems to be created or tied into Jewish people. Did you know that?
Huh.
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Yeah. Instead of a coincidence, maybe we can call it a coincidence.
Are you creating a segue here to the next segment?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. You rascal, you're always doing that kind of stuff, aren't you?
So, we'll have a new disclaimer.
A new disclaimer.
We're not going to follow the ADL disclaimer. We're going to follow the Ministry of Truth disclaimer.
Does the ADL know this?
I hope they'll forgive us.
Sounds Jewish. You can talk over.
I can?
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome back to Talking Truth to Power and to Jews in the News. And we have a new Ministry of Truth disclaimer, Leland. It's kind of long. We're going to have to memorize it. Okay. We acknowledge that Vladimir Putin is an evil man and a brutal aggressor. There were no other reasons for this war, and anyone who suggests otherwise is a Russian tool. Ukraine is a bastion of freedom and democracy under siege, and the West, indeed the whole globalist community, has a moral obligation to come to the country's defense. Putin is a new Hitler going on a rampage just like the 30s, and if the democratic power did not halt Putin's aggression, he will not stop with gains in Ukraine, but seek to conquer other European nations, eventually plunging humanity into another world war. Indeed, his assault on Ukraine poses a potentially lethal threat to democracy throughout the international system. All right? If you got that?
I got that.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring up that this whole new Ministry of Information it's all seems to be run by our friends, the Jewish people, and it's finally and it's just a great coincidence. We can only think of it as that. So at the top, of course, is the Department of Homeland Security head, Alejandro Mayorkas. And did you know that
He happens to be Jewish.
he happens to be a Cuban Jew? Yes. And
God, I despise that guy.
yes, he has done his best to allow in as many illegal immigrants as any Jew not named Stephen Miller has. Why do Jews support mass immigration? Because it makes them feel safer to live in a multicultural democracy than in a pluralistic constitutional republic. Jewish people fear a white Christian majority more than any other, even Islam. And then the second greatest influence in the disinformation campaign will be the media, such as MSN, BC. Guess who the CEO is?
Tell me.
Brian L. Roberts. And despite his Anglican name, he
doesn't sound Jewish.
Yeah, no, he also happens to be Jewish.
Okay.
And so
On his
he's
mom's side?
not only Jewish, but as a billionaire, you'd have to call him an oligarch too.
Yeah, sure.
Then the head of the Information Governance Board, none other than the beautiful and talented Nina Jackowitz. And I say that kind of loosely.
She is something else, isn't she?
You know what her nickname is?
No.
Shovelface.
Afraid to ask.
Shovelface.
Shovelface.
Now, she is probably a Polish Jew who hates Russia.
Should we have asked our audience to put the children to bed when you
We can only assume that Ms. Jankowicz is in fact Jewish because she refuses to give out her ethnicity or religion. Wikipedia has nothing about that, but it is widely believed that she is Jewish and that she has spoken about her grandparents having been in the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. So even though it's a matter of speculation, I think we could safely say that she is Jewish. And
Yeah.
who would have thought that a Polish Jew would have any animosity towards Russia? But apparently she does. She went to Yale University, that bastion of Jewish intellectual thought. And
she would have been a member of the Skull and Bone Society there.
she may have been, yes.
Except that they don't accept women. Or at
Oh,
least
okay.
they haven't yet.
Okay. She majored in anti-Russian studies at Yale University, and she actually served as an advisor to the foreign minister of the Ukrainian government. But she is, of course, self-proclaimed international recognized expert on disinformation, a Polish Jewish neoliberal globalist. Of course, we can expect she will be an unbiased critic of disinformation.
Oh, yeah, they've told us she will be.
Yes. Okay, but however, her record doesn't seem to indicate that because no. She spent weeks before the 2020 election spreading the CIA lie that the Biden family emails found on Hunter's laptop were Russian disinformation. She admires.
So she lied about that.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that she disinformed us. Is that the right word?
But she's going to be the
head of the Ministry of Truth. Yes.
So you're saying she disinformed us?
I think so. Yes.
Huh.
I know. Even though I said that we had the disclaimer, I have to say that she probably did. She has also publicly admired Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier, and she's one of those that believes that Russia seized control of the U.S. with blackmail, and they lost Hillary the election in 2016 by purchasing $100,000 worth of Facebook ads and $4,000 worth of Twitter ads.
Not to mention Hunter's laptop.
Right. But that's because democracy is really very fragile.
I see.
Yeah. So you have to protect democracy from disinformation.
From people like ourselves.
Yes. And she also believed in things like Trump, Russia, and Assange conspired to release Hillary's emails and Dean's emails, that Russia paid bounties for U.S. soldiers killed in Afghanistan, that Biden did nothing wrong in Ukraine, but Giuliani was duped by the Ukrainians.
You know, I'm kind of going out on a thin branch here, but you know how I think of conspiratorial motives and all these things.
Yes.
And I'm thinking they had their eye on her for many, many years for this position.
Uh-huh.
And the first thing that must have come out of Obama, because I think it was Obama, and that's what Tulsi said too. This was Tulsi's idea. It was that Barack Obama originated this scheme. It comes out just as the Supreme Court leaks this story. I mean, they're all coordinated.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think there's any way you can walk away from connecting those dots.
Okay. Well, I got a few more dots.
I know more dots to
More
connect?
dots. More
Okay.
dots to connect. Yeah. Then you go down the line at MSNBC and you come across Ari Melber, who calls himself a First Amendment lawyer, but he has written political columns and he has written political columns for The Nation, The Atlantic, Reuters, and Politico. But we have to admit that the ADL's demands against Silicon Valley with regard to mass censorship, if you want to go into internet censorship, go back over a decade. In 2014, ADL chief Abe Foxman began publicly demanding that Facebook remove pages criticizing the Jews. And he wrote about how Mark Zuckerberg tried to shame him because he is Jewish.
Because he happens to be Jewish.
Right. It's another Cohen incident. Would not consider racist speech and hateful propaganda, including Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism. But even more than hate speech, it was the fake news.
Yeah.
And that was...
They've been a major player in this emerging police state we're watching unfold.
Right. And the claim under the fake news was that citizens, people who vote, who have the wherewithal to go into a booth and pick who runs the government, but they're incapable of looking at different types of ideas and drawing conclusions from them, and therefore needed to be babysat by multinational corporations, most of whom, by coincidence, happen to be run by Jews.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was the Jewish lobby that originated the concept of fact checkers through the Annenberg Foundation, a Jewish activist and lobbying group run by the Annenberg family.
That was a very clever angle,
Yes.
wasn't it? The fact checkers.
Right.
Because we need fact checkers to check the
sure.
fact checkers.
Yeah. So in September of 2017, politically biased fact-checking became the key to censorship. And the Association for Psychological Science published a paper from the Annenberg Public Policy Center giving instructions on how to most effectively fact-check. And this was the guidebook that was then followed by Snopes and other fact-checkers. So fake news was even more damaging to perceptions of what it means to live in a free society than hate speech. And so that is the Cohen incidents.
Coincidence?
Yes, between
The
the
Dow.
Ministry of Truth and the Jewish element in our
Well,
society.
the equity markets have rallied
Have they?
on this rate hike by the Fed. The Dow is now up 600.